First, I'd like to introduce Barbara Hammond, our CEO of Low Carbon Hub. She founded the Low Carbon Hub back in 2011, 2012, and has built it into the community energy organisation it is now. So with a renewable energy portfolio that really puts Oxfordshire at the forefront of the energy transition. She's got a deep commitment to community ownership and to making clean energy work for people and not just the wires and switches. So welcome, Barbara. And then we've also got Tim Jones. If you'd also like to give a wave, Tim. He's our Renewables Portfolio Director, the Low Carbon Hub. He's come to the Low Carbon Hub with 35 years of experience in the energy sector, and now we're channeling all of that expertise into accelerating our zero carbon ambitions here in Oxfordshire. So Tim also sits on Low Carbon Hub's investment committee, so he knows our Ray Valley solar project and the battery project we're going to be talking about today, inside out. So thanks very much for joining us. To begin with, I'm going to be muted and I'm going to hand over to Barbara. So next slide, please, Hal.
Thank you very much, Beth, and hello, everyone. We're holding this webinar, and doing the project at Ray Valley Solar because as we move through the energy transition and in order to make sure that Britain can be powered by clean energy, we need to have battery storage because, as we all know, renewables are intermittent in that the sun doesn't shine at night and the wind doesn't always blow. But we're just on the start of the journey, really, with battery storage. And we have different types of opportunity that we can take, which is what we're seeing on the slide here. It's going to be really important to the transition that we help people to understand the opportunities for domestic batteries on the left-hand side. That can be anything from 5 to 15 kilowatts. I myself have an 8 kilowatt hour battery in my house. And it will help us both to control our own energy requirements or our own demand, but also help the grid when it needs it by exporting power that we've made from our own solar panels. So how can we all take part in that? How can people who are not in my privileged position to be able to afford that take part? We need to do a lot of work on that as the Low Carbon Hub through our community benefit programs. Mary's here to be able to answer questions on that later if anyone has them. And then on the right-hand side, we've got the really huge grid-scale commercially developed battery projects that import and export from the grid and make their living from what's called the arbitrage between when you import when energy is cheap and you export when energy is more expensive. But what we're talking about mainly today, and what we feel we can talk about, so don't ask us to be experts about the whole of it, is community scale batteries that are co-located with generation. And we think there's a real opportunity here for community energy to have a part to play in that sort of mainly sub 5 megawatt market where the connections queue, which is a real problem in the UK, as you may have heard, where we've got many times oversubscribed projects wanting to get connections than can be given connections at the transmission level. But if we're talking sub 5 megawatts, they can be consented by distribution network operators without reference to the transmission system. So that's an opportunity for community energy to make a difference locally. We know that the distribution network operators are interested in this scale of battery as they go into their next price control period, when they're going to be allowed to plan their financing strategy for upgrading the grid many years in advance, which they've never been able to do before. They know that battery storage is going to help them to reduce the costs of that transition. So Low Carbon Hub, we're working out how to do this with our first project, and we want to make sure that we're sharing the journey with our community energy colleagues so that we can move ahead at pace and with confidence. And at that point, I will hand over to Tim, who will explain the detail of what we're doing at Ray Valley Solar.
So our research revealed that we're losing about in excess of 800 megawatt hours of production each year because the export connection can't accommodate it and have to ground it, which is costing us £70,000 a year in lost revenue. So that prompted us to look into battery technology as the first port of call, if you will. And then if we move on to the next slide, the other development that's of major concern to us is that as well as an oversubscription of batteries, there's an oversubscription of solar generation applications in the connections pipeline as well. And what that means is that in the future, there'll be too much generation on a bright summer's day and the system won't be able to accommodate it. So if we go to the next slide, please, Hal. When solar farms first started emerging in the market some 15 years ago or so, 99.5% of all solar power generation was accommodated by the market. We're having trouble getting to the next slide. Today, that figure is down nearer 85%. So what that illustrates is that we're already on a summer's day, a hot summer's day, over capacity of what we can actually accommodate as a national system. So this graph, which you can see now, shows what's called the capture rates. And what that means is of all the electricity that's generated by PV assets, if you look at January 2017, it was 98%. It's expected in the next 2 years to fall to around 85%. Now, at the moment, you have what's called CFD, contract for difference, which means if the grid can't accommodate it, we get told to, we don't, but you would get told to shut down and you'll still get paid a fee for that electricity you're generating. In the future, that will have to change because the market simply can't afford to do that when the volume of solar farms that's going to get built is built. So those two drivers have led us on to the need to look at whether or not a battery makes sense for our assets, and the place to start, as we own it 100%, seemed logical in Ray Valley Solar. So can we just go to the next slide? So we've actually made a decision, we made it at Christmas, that we're going to invest 1.8 million into a 3 megawatt 6-hour battery at Ray Valley Solar. And as part of that journey, it's a journey of learning. It's all new technology for us as well as the industry in general. We're going to be going to market today, I believe, to invite you to join us on that journey by investing with us in this battery with a view to leveling out and recovering all of that 800 megawatt hours of lost capacity, along with providing the electricity on a better and more efficient basis in the future. We'll look more on that at the end of the seminar. But if we just go to the next slide. So the obvious question is, why a battery? Why is it needed? So this little diagram hopefully makes that fairly clear. We generate electricity when the sun's at its peak. It passes from direct current through an inverter and comes out as alternating current, which can then either go into the grid, mast straight through, exported, which is what 97% of Ray Valley's production does today, or if you have the facility, you can either divert it into the battery when you've got too much production, or equally, you can draw production into that battery at a cheaper time. So that's typically the night ray, as it were. So then you can put it through the mast at a different time of the day. So that's called arbitrage, which means you're playing a game, if you will, between a lower price and a higher price and choosing when to buy and when to sell. And once through and exported, it's consumed in the normal way by domestic and commercial households. So go to the next slide. That arbitrage I just described, this curvy line tries to show what it is that I'm alluding to. So there are two peak periods for electricity demand: 6 till 9 in the morning and 4 till 7 in the afternoon and early evening. The problem is, if you overlay the production curve from a solar farm, it's almost the opposite of that in terms of when the electricity is generated. And that's why midday, when the sun's at its peak and the solar plants are all operating at their maximum capacity, there'll be too much electricity. And so people will have to either shut down or accept a very, very low price for that electricity. So we're trying to, by installing a battery, we're trying to insulate the solar farm's future by leveling out that supply line, if you will. So midday you have high solar output but lower demand, and a battery can store that midday and then dispatch it either at the 4 till 7 afternoon evening period, or keep it overnight and then dispatch it at 6 till 9 the next morning, which one solves a couple of problems. One, we're not wasting that naturally generated electricity. Two, you're going to realize revenue that you would otherwise lose. And a slightly nuanced benefit that you can't easily measure or describe, but it's easy enough to understand, is that we've got somewhere between 30 to 60 billion pounds to spend upgrading the national grid system. And every battery like this that reduces the burden on the national grid system's upgrades means, one, less of that 60 billion needs to be spent, and two, it's less local disruption, where otherwise you might have to have considerable interruption to upgrade the national transmission system as well. So from a local community benefit, if it puts off huge disruption, and I don't know if any of you do, I live on the journey, my journey to work crosses the HS2 that's being constructed, the rail system, and the disruption to people's lives is quite material. And the same sort of thing will happen when the national grid has finally got the funds together to start upgrading. So it's a slightly less visible but important benefit as well.
Yes, I mean, effectively.
That's great. Thanks so much. So can I just ask everybody stays muted, please, on the call? Thanks very much. If you could just mute yourselves. Thank you. So that's, can you find them? Okay, that's really great. Thank you. So I've got a few questions. We had quite a lot coming in advance, as it's quite a hot topic. So I've got a few questions to start with, and then we can open it up. So first of all, I just wanted to ask Tim about, so this, we talk about being the UK's first co-located battery. Mm-hmm. Can you just tell us in more simple terms what we mean by co-located battery and what the benefits of that are? Okay, so I'm sure you're all familiar with rechargeable batteries in home and how they'll take a charge and then when they're recharged, they dispatch the charge. Each time that happens, the efficiency of the battery is impaired just a little bit, a fraction of a percentage every time. So what happens over a period of time is the battery's efficiency declines and falls away. And just like a disposable recharging battery, the commercial size ones one day have to be recycled themselves as well. So one of the things that affects how quickly the efficiency is impaired is how far away the battery is from its inputs and outputs. It's called RTE, which is round trip efficiency. So the shorter the distances between those connections, the less damage it does to the battery over its life. So to have it co-located is the optimum option, is the best way to do it. And for us, it absolutely made sense at Ray Valley Solar. Yeah. So we had some spare ground on Ray Valley Solar, and we've identified the perfect spot to do it. So the round trip efficiency will be as high as it possibly could be. Great, thank you. And then I'm going to come to Barbara next, actually, if you're there, Barbara. So can you just
I
give
am.
us a bit of thank you. Can you just give us a bit of insight into why now is the time to act on batteries, and should other community groups be considering batteries as well?
Yes. So I think there's been quite a lot of comment in the chat about technology maturity. And so what we're seeing now is that the technology that we're using, the lithium-ion battery, is much more known. It's much more settled, and so now is the time that we can get into this area of the electricity market with a much more known and stable product. So that's one reason. I know there's been a lot of comment in the chat about different battery chemistries, and I absolutely agree that that work needs to be done. But we have to have stable technologies before we can rely on them for investment. Second reason why now is the price of the batteries. We're seeing the same sort of downward curve for the cost of batteries per megawatt as we were seeing with solar PV back in the early days, in the early 2010s. And the question is at what point you dive in. If anyone remembers about when computers were getting more and more powerful and cheaper, you sort of had to make a decision about when you were going to dive in and get your new computer. It's the same thing with batteries. And so we're now at a point with Ray Valley Solar where it makes sense to make this investment given the particular conditions around the cost of Ray Valley Solar, what it's doing as an installation in itself, and how mature the markets are. We've made the decision to go in now, as Tim was saying. And so we're learning. We're very confident that the decision we've taken about this chemistry, this configuration, and this timing is going to work. We've had expert external opinion on that. And that's crucial. If there's anybody out there on the call, part of the community that's thinking about doing this, we're not going to be able to give you some clear rules of thumb here. We're going to be saying, please go to experts who can help you to know whether your particular possibility is going to work for you now. And we've done all of that, and we're very happy to share all of that with people, obviously. And I think the other thing that everybody needs to be well aware of is, of course, you need to have your planning approval in place for batteries. We bought Ray Valley Solar originally with up to 20 megawatts of battery included in the approval, and all we've had to do for this project is go for what's called a non-material amendment to put the 3 megawatts of battery on there in a slightly different place than the original planning approval gave. And that was a straightforward process. But that's the sort of thing that you have to check before you dive in. I think I've covered all of those points there, Beth. Happy to take more, obviously, in the chat.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Barbara. That's really helpful. And actually, because you mentioned learning there, I'm going to come to Tim now and say, so what have we specifically learned about this project so far? So how have we decided whether this site is suitable, and what would you say your main learnings are from Ray Valley?
Okay, so you need physical space. These batteries are very big. Think of a container on the back of an articulated lorry. That's about a megawatt. So if you've got 3 megawatts, you may have 3 containers to accommodate, for example. So there's physical space which needs the planning consent that Barbara's just referenced. There's how much power you're actually losing is quite important. So as I mentioned, we were losing £70,000 worth a year anyway. So that prompted the inquiry. To just recover that 70,000 of lost revenue on its own wouldn't be sufficient as an investment case. So you have to be able to go above and beyond that. So this is where there's a mind separation. You've got to get your head around. If you've got a solar farm now, you can contract it under a power purchase agreement if you chose to, and get a period of security around the costs and the revenues you're going to get in. So you might have a 2, 3, 5 year PPA at a fixed price, and you know you're getting a certain revenue. With a battery, you can get some contractual security, but not all of it. So not enough to make a financial case on its own. So you're going to have to shift your mindset to the point where you're comfortable putting trust in traders to trade that arbitrage, as I mentioned, the time shift at a profit. So 70,000 that we lose is a quarter of what the revenue of the battery's income profile would look like, because the 70,000 recovered on its own wouldn't be sufficient. So the thing we've learned and having to adapt to is a much more dynamic market with far more risk involved. So if you've got the battery as a supplement to an established business like Ray Valley, you're on a much stronger footing to begin with. So that's probably the key thing. And what we've learned is the knowledge that and understanding that needs is exactly what Barbara's just referenced. You really do need some expensive, unfortunately, expert advice to be able to make those decisions.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, all throughout planning for this webinar, we've said no one size fits all. And so we're very happy to share the learning for Ray Valley and the batteries as we go along.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. That's really great, thank you. And I don't know whether this has already been covered in the chat, so apologise if it has, but maybe you would just like to give our audience a sense of how much the battery at Ray Valley Solar is costing.
Yeah, sure. So it's a 3 megawatt battery with 6 hour duration, which means it can discharge if it is fully charged twice in the day. So 3 hours in the morning, the 6 till 9 breakfast peak, and 3 hours in the afternoon, evening, the 4 till 7 peak. It's costing £1.8 million as an investment. It's going to cost something like £40,000 to £50,000 a year to operate and maintain. It's going to cost about £150,000 for the skid for its location where it's going to sit on the concrete pad and so on. These sorts of costs are very site specific, and we are fortunate there's an access road, because one of the key requirements for the planning is emergency vehicle access and so on. So those are the costs we've sort of got to so far.
Great. Thank you very much. Okay, and I can see that Mark's had his hand up for a while, so thank you, Mark. So I'd like to come to our audience now for some questions. I'll also ask Mary in a second if there's been anything in the chat that maybe we want to talk to, but we've got Mark, I believe, with your hand up. Do you want to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yeah, thank you very much, and thank you for putting this session on. Just one very minor point, first of all. I'm in this call using Gmail, and I can't use the chat. So it's a feature, it seems to be a feature of Zoom that it doesn't seem to like certain social media accounts. So Gmail users are being somewhat discriminated against. So that's that one. Actual perhaps more pertinent question is around, I did see something the other day about HMRC is looking at the whole arbitrage stuff from a point of view of seeing how much people are earning from that, and potentially, and this sounds like you'll be in the ballpark for that. But it does sound, I mean, what you're proposing sounds fantastic. It sounds really the obvious thing to do. And just one actual proper question for you, maybe. And I'm assuming the answer is no, but does this have any impact at all on how you then choose to sell your power to, say, if you want to try and sell to local communities? Thank you very much indeed.
Yeah, yes, is the short answer. What we're trying to understand is how effective the best way to operate a battery, with the view to then, using our own asset as a learning tool, then spread the gospel, if you will, in terms of how a local community might be able to use just a battery on its own or in association with an existing solar plant. So the long-term aspiration would be for batteries to somehow benefit the locality where they're actually situated. So yes, community energy supply is on our radar, if you will, as something we aspire to. I don't have the answer today, but that's an aspiration, certainly.
Barbara, are you on mute? I'm afraid, Barbara, sorry. We had to say it
Sorry,
once.
getting my
didn't
etiquette wrong again. Thanks. Yeah, no, I completely agree with Tim. There's a lot of work to do on being able to work out how actually to do local supply. If we could get the government to the point where they were clear about a model for that within the balancing code mechanisms, we would be all for that. And I do think, as Tim was saying, there would be a good use case for that, working with the distribution network operators. And we're really looking forward to working with SSEN on those issues in the Strategic Innovation Fund project we've got going live in May, that if anybody wants to know anything about, they can talk to Mary Brooks, our colleague, about who's leading on that.
Thank you. There's I've got a question that I'd like to read out, but does anybody else also feel free to put their hand up, and we can come to you in a bit. So something from the chat that might be just relevant for everybody in case it doesn't get picked up is that I assume the batteries won't be needed during winter as the solar output won't be high enough to reach the export limit. Is there a plan to import energy cheaply overnight and export at the evening peak to maximise the return from the batteries during winter?
Right, so it's a very, very good point, and the short answer is no for Ray Valley Solar, because we don't have an import connection. So this is one of those examples of how site specific every battery is. So we don't have the luxury of being able to import at night and discharge in the day. Unfortunately, the whole area around Vista is being upgraded, but there won't be any additional capacity for at least 5 years, which refers back to my comment about the whole grid system needs upgrading. However, we still generate 20-25% of summer capacity during the winter. So we will use what we can to charge the battery and discharge it at the optimum time. So there will still be arbitrage opportunities, yes.
Barbara, do you have anything to add there?
Yeah, I put into the chat, Tim, that we've got a longer term strategy for RVS where we will be looking at increasing the import and export capacity. But as you say, that's a longer term strategy than we would ideally like it to be. But we do have lots of opportunity there, and we need to get ready for it, as you were saying. But the battery that we're putting on site works as it stands, and it's good to remind people, I think, of that. There's a really good rule of thumb on solar. The winter 6 months is 25% and the summer 6 months is 75% in a normal year.
Thank you. Does anybody else want to put their hand up, by the way, or can I go into one of the other questions we've already had? I've got one. Okay, so we'll come to that in a second. Are there any barriers or misconceptions that are slowing the take-up of battery storage solutions at the moment?
The connection we just alluded to is the biggest headache, the biggest problem. If, like Ray Valley Solar, there isn't sufficient capacity for an import capacity, it does restrict the value that the battery is bringing. So that's a very difficult one. The battery applications market is 7 times oversubscribed, so the list is currently being culled, and I doubt there'll be another major battery connection granted for years and years into the future. The one exception which Barbara mentioned right at the start is that if it's sub 5 megawatts, in other words less than 4.99 megawatts or less, it doesn't get assessed by the transmission system. It only has to meet the local distribution requirements, in which case, and that's quite a good size for community energy, there's a significant number of battery only even opportunities at sub 5 megawatts. So in that instance, yes, but it's all dependent on the grid. And even we keep saying about you need expert advice, even getting the grid application in correctly and processed correctly requires expert advice. So that is an issue. So don't think this is the golden bullet. It isn't.
Thank you, Tim. I've got a couple of other questions that have come in as well. So a couple of technical questions. So from Stefano. is there a software that helps calculate the cost effectiveness of a battery system?
We're trying to make one as we speak. We're trying to build a model, and it's giving us all grey hairs. No is the short answer, because every application is different. That said, there is software available on a domestic basis, because that's a little bit more uniform. All our consumption and houses are very similar. So on a domestic scale, yes. On a commercial scale, no.
Thank
There's
you.
just contributing to that, the MCS Foundation did a very good guide for people who've got PV as to what the different lifestyles that they have would give them in terms of use of the generation that they get from the solar. And there's a battery one in there that, again, you can apply your different lifestyle to. And what I found when I put the battery in that I have is that I'm now at 95% capture of the solar coming off my roof, rather than about 35%. So that exists, and go to that very, very good website if you want to get hold of those guides.
Oh, great. Thank you, Barbara. I've got a couple of other questions that have come in. So this one's quite relevant for the time, but with the price of oil and gas in flux, how can batteries help us strengthen the resilience of our energy system?
But the resilience at a local level, this kind of project can help, because locally you've got a supply in times of shortage, for example. Nationally, it won't help immediately, because the wholesale electricity price is 99% linked to the wholesale gas price in our country. That's what makes us so inefficient, if you will, in terms of cost of energy. We are inextricably linked. So the more battery capacity that comes in, the more gas-fired plant will get closed down, just like the coal plants of old. But until they are closed down, the market won't have enough of a disconnection from the gas price for it to be meaningful. So on a local level, it can be very beneficial. On a national level, it won't be until there's enough batteries in the system that the gas plant has to be closed down. And at the moment, the market isn't set up to force the gas plants to close. So it's not on the immediate horizon, sadly.
Barbara, anything to add to that?
Yeah, and I just reinforce what Tim's saying. There's a big set of issues about how the markets are being managed through the transition, and both Tim and I have our frustrations about that. I think it would be fair to say.
Yeah.
Thanks very much. So I've got a question about the pricing. So from Zach, how much is the price difference between the low day rate and the peak evening rate?
Okay. Low day rate today is about 6p per kilowatt. Tomorrow it'll be 0. Tomorrow being one day soon. That's why we're driven to it. The peak, 12 pence by comparison, double. So a megawatt of electricity, which is just 1,000 times more, typically in the market today sells for about £65 a megawatt. Last night you could sell it at a peak during the peak time for over £200 because of what's going on in the Middle East. So the variation can be very extreme.
And then there was a follow-up from Zach as well to say, so is the rest of the solar farm then left exporting at the lower rate during the day?
Yes.
Yeah, that will continue to happen.
Yes, it does. Yes. Yeah. And it's important if you do an economic analysis, you must take into account the opportunity cost you lose. If you use the solar power to feed the battery, you must acknowledge that the sixpence or whatever revenue that you would have got, you don't get that anymore, because one of the mistake people make is they think they're charging the battery for free because it's from the solar, but you're not, because you would have sold it otherwise. So you do have to be careful you don't colour the accounts review too favourably.
Thank you. Is anybody nobody's raised their hand at the moment? No, that's fine. I've got a few more to read out.
Can I just,
Oh, yeah, sure, Barbara,
sorry,
yeah.
Beth, yes, it's just a follow-on question that I think is relevant. Peter Redman has seen comment that on high solar days, the electricity price is reduced by up to 33% due to only the lowest cost gas generation being used. Tim, is that correct?
It falls eventually to nuclear cost, but yes, it does fall to low cost generation, and again, it's time dependent. It depends what time of the day it is as well.
So another question about the technology. So how long does a battery like this last, and what happens at the end of it, at its end of life?
Right. Okay. So life expectancy of the one we've ordered is 15 years. It needs annual maintenance, comes with a 10-year warranty. The round trip efficiency is what will dictate the actual number. So we modelled it being conservative to have a 14-year life rather than 15, but they don't generally last longer. They tend to last shorter than is expected. And it's almost entirely dictated, as I said, by the round trip efficiency. Excuse me. When it reaches the end of its life, it is 96 point something percent recyclable, so it will get recycled.
Brilliant, thank you. It's really helpful. Is there any other questions that have come into the chat? Barbara, Marino?
I think we've answered them all.
Excellent. Oh, you're very efficient. Oh no, we've got a hand up. I was just about to move up. That's great.
Oh, we've just got a question in from Mick Johnson as well. What is the EOL round trip efficiency? I'm not sure I know what EOL means, but I'm sure you do, Tim.
Oh, end of life?
End of life.
So again, it's site dependent, but the Ray Valley one ends up at 72% in year 15. So it starts at 99.4, I think, today, and in 15 years it'll be a 72%.
Thank you. And I can see someone's got their hand up as well. Ross, did you want to unmute and ask your question?
Hi. Just you did mention earlier the novel factor here is that this BESS would be behind the meter. I think quite a lot of the private sector are doing that already, or have I misunderstood?
What of the sector did you say?
A lot of the private sector.
Private sector, yeah, certainly. Like on the domestic front, if that's what you mean, yes, they are. And
now, industrial.
And industrial, yeah. So its momentum has grown significantly in the last 12 months or so. So yes, absolutely correct.
Okay, so I was going to come to Barbara for some wrapping up, if that's okay, Barbara. We have a slide to get up, I think, and then so basically just one of my final questions to Barbara is, how do we now build the knowledge and expertise around the battery technologies and the operational models we've been talking about? What's our call to action?
Thanks, Beth. Just before I do that, however, there is a final question just popped into the chat from Matthew Wright about local oppositional support during the planning process. Anecdotally, he's heard of objections on the basis of potential fire risk in lithium-ion battery storage facilities. So, Matthew, the Ray Valley solar planning application was quite a long time ago now, before any of these issues were really coming to the fore, because we didn't have much experience of them. And so the planning process at Ray Valley Solar was very straightforward, and no contention about it at all, partly because of the bit of Oxfordshire that it's in that isn't considered to be that pretty. The fire issue, I'll just revert to Tim, because we know that the particular battery that we've chosen is very good from that point of view. Tim, would you like to elaborate?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very valid and growing concern. Fire with batteries is an issue, and we deliberately chose a system that has a built-in internal fire suppression system. So it's accredited in excess of the requirements, so that if there is a fire, it's detected and dealt with immediately. two, we moved the location of the battery from the original planning permission to improve the access for emergency vehicles in the event of a fire. And three, the other commercial issue with some of the batteries at the moment is that if they do catch fire or fail, they impair or damage the solar farm. And so we've additionally are going to install an enhanced separation system so that the battery hopefully can't feed back and damage the solar farm as well. But yeah, it's an absolutely valid and emerging learning about battery and battery technology. So yes, it is a material consideration. And from a planning perspective, if you were proposing to put a battery in a difficult location from an emergency services position, then you would get some objections to that.
Thanks, Tim. And I can see we've had one hand raised, so I've got time for a quick question. So, John, would you like to unmute and ask your question?
Yes, it's more a comment than anything else. I'm talking about individual rather than, Ray Valley. Barbara will probably support this, is that we have PV panels, and if anyone else has PV panels and you get a battery, obviously you get to the stage where the PV powers up the battery and you've got the battery for the next morning to cook your breakfast, but you've also got the opportunity to boost your battery in the middle of the night by Octopus. There are other suppliers available, but Octopus will give you a rate which is a fraction of what it is during the day. So you boost your battery up during the night and you cook your breakfast for nothing when the previous day has been a rainy day as opposed to a sunny day.
Yep.
Agreed, John. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Thanks very much. So just to remind Barbara of the question, sorry, Barbara, it was, so how do we now go ahead and build the knowledge and the expertise around battery technology that we need for the future?
Cool. I think we had a final question just coming in.
Okay.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
I don't see a question,
no.
so I assumed it was possibly me you were allowing to come in as I put my hand up, but
I've only just seen that, Mark. Yep, go for it.
Yeah, sorry about it. It's just to follow on from what John said. I've got solar panels, I've got a battery, I've also got an electric car, and I can buy my electricity for the battery at 7p overnight. I'm guaranteed an export price of 15p. So even without the solar panels, I could be importing and then exporting and making money on that. But so I do tend to export. I try to do it during the 4 to 7. Well, no, tends to be a bit later than that, 6 till 9 area, to try and be a good citizen, as it were. But the thing that frustrates me is that I've got a car with 7 times as much battery capacity as I've got in my garage, and there's no way of using arbitrage, your word, to help smooth the demand on there. And it would be, applying it to yours, it would be far more economically viable for your battery system if you could get an import as well as an export facility on there, because it gives you far more scope, and it would help smooth things down. So it seems something the government should be moving on, is trying to do a lot more, making it far more easier for local smoothing rather than concentrating on massive grids to allow moving energy an awful long way. We will need that, but the more local smoothing, the less it will cost of that 30 billion, as you said. So I hope you keep pushing for the import facility as well, despite the fact you suggested it was years off. But anyway, that's my bit.
We certainly will. Thank you for that, Mark. Yeah, I just think it's quite hard in a market-based system, it's quite hard getting certainty. So, and you know, I'm one of the few people probably on this call that actually remembers the transition from town gas to natural gas in the 60s, and that was planned street by street. It would be really nice if we could do that with all of this stuff as we transition, but we can't. So we have to deal with what we've got, and we're learning. And I think that brings us to the final thing that we wanted to say in this seminar, apart from thank you very much to everyone for coming. And we hope you found it really interesting and useful. And we'd love you to support us in what we're doing at Ray Valley Solar and think about investing in the battery that we're putting in this year, so that we can have a chance of getting solar 24/7, as it says on the final slide. And I think a point that we really wanted to make here and emphasize again is that we are learning. We happen to have a very good use case for this that we can implement now, and it makes sense to do that. But as Tim was saying, and we will keep saying, it's very difficult to get a complete rule of thumb approach to batteries. We're all learning. The big commercial guys are still learning as well. We've got one of those on our board who waxes lyrical about the difficulties he faces every day, deploying many hundreds of millions of pounds of funding into this. And so we wanted to say that we have a stable and really growing and influential community energy set of businesses in the UK now. And we think it's going to be very important as we move forward on all of these new ways of flexibly working with the developing markets, that we're learning about that as a community energy sector through our trade bodies, Community Energy England, Scotland, Northern Ireland and Wales. And so we hope to be doing that continuously through the process that we're going through, and we certainly hope to be doing that as others start looking at and implementing projects too. And we've heard about one or two in the chat. Thank you very much for pointing those out to us that we can investigate. So we're going to be asking ourselves throughout how we can help communities take part in battery technology and enjoy the benefits, how we can de-risk that process so that it's safe for community investment to go in, and how the local power plan can have a role to play in helping all of that to happen, because we think that's really the reason the government is putting all of that funding in, to get these things really well honed and sorted out. So thank you very much indeed for joining us today. We hope to continue this conversation. We'll be doing more webinars, so lots of opportunity for doing that. We'll be keeping you updated about the progress with the battery. And of course, I have to say, finally, our share offer is open on FX now. Please do go straight there and invest if you would like to. Thank you.